that, Mr. Babin. I actually said as much during both the Public Works and the Ways and Means Committee meeting.
Great.
Further questions? Mr. Foley?
Yeah, Lynn, if I heard you correctly, so our fund balance hasn't, well, decreased by 3.7, but our reserves went up by about 3.8. So those you said they kind of balanced out. But our sales tax was roughly like an additional $1.5 million. So I guess my question is, if I'm reading this correctly, was these kind of balanced out almost by luck? Is that how we can kind of analyze this, or is there more to it?
I think there's a lot of moving pieces in this budget, and as I said, social services had a bad year. The kids that come into care and the funding that we receive from the state and federal government is not something we can control. And it usually is cyclical. Usually, actually, after I have a bad year, the next year is better. I mean, it's ironic. We get more money based on our spending in the previous years a lot of times in foster care. So you don't get the money when you need it. You actually get it in the next year, and it kind of goes like that. And I said with this state training school funding, that was an unexpected large hit too. That we had, literally 3 kids in care, and it can end up costing us $500,000. I mean, it's a significant amount of funding. And, I am going to finish going through, looking through their stuff, but you're right, Ryan. That's why, it's a budget, and this really shows you how much it can vary all over the place. And luckily, a lot of things are offsetting usually for us. Yep.
Mr. Badman?
And I think that one of the things I want to point out, because I totally couldn't agree with you more. There's so many things outside our control. There's so many things that come and go. And we sometimes look at our fund balance and we say, well, we've got a lot of money. We were lucky. I don't know if it was luck, but at least it was fortuitous that sales tax was up last year. We've got to remember, had it not been up, then we still would have had sufficient money in the reserves so that we could have absorbed that extra 1.5 million. Now, we don't want to, but it's one of the reasons that it's so important to keep a fund balance that is above the basic 11 or 12 million that we have to have for kind of cash flow purposes. And I think we should never forget that. We should never look at these big numbers and say, well, we got lots of money, because it's one bad year and we don't have lots of money. So
I agree.
Ms. Daly?
At one point, the 2017 budget was it looked like it was going to use 1.3 million from the fund balance. And when you look at all the 3 funds.
All the funds, yes, correct.
Did it use, I know in the general fund it didn't, but did the other, how much?
Oh, the only fund that used any was the D fund, and it used $170,000.
Out of that 1.3?
Correct.
Mr. Lattimore?
In regards to the equal pay, if Aileen and this young lady just spoke, if we increase it, it's not going to hurt the fund balance, is it?
I had no comment.
It's a policy decision for the legislature to decide tonight.
Did it?
Equal pay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on the other things I briefed you on?
Yes, you gave a report tonight on Capusis and broadband. I know that Fred sent along, we're talking about an array of solar at the County House Road, and I want to make sure the terms and conditions of the contract that was sent to me are looked by the Capusa lawyer, who actually deals with communications and power. I know there's been some projects that have been done by the city without the power agency being involved, and they made some major mistakes, and it cost dearly to the bottom line of the project. So I want to make sure that we do not avoid having more than one set of eyes in regards to the final decision on any power project that we have.
Having another set of skilled eyes from an energy law perspective, look at the contracts, might not be a bad idea. I guess we'd have to discuss and figure out who, whether Capusa's attorney whether it would be a conflict for him to also look at the county's contract, or if he's going to give us legal advice on that, or if he's going to look at it from a Capusa perspective, we can talk offline, after the
Yeah,
meeting about
but
that.
I just want to make sure that this board realizes that we do not want to go so fast that we make a mistake, as the city did, and at our county house digester. I mean, I'd like to just slow that down a little bit. Thank you.
Any other questions for the administrator? All right, my report, I have one topic. If Sheila can pass that out. As you're aware, we talk about blurred lines of leadership, and over the course of the summer, we did a little study, and the result is the operations framework that Sheila is sending out. I want to remind you that that was voted on by the body and became county policy. So what I'm asking is that you take the time to review it, and I'll highlight some significant changes at next month's meeting, but I just wanted to get that in everybody's hands so that they can review it and look. It clearly defines the roles and responsibilities of all of us, all the department heads, the county administrator. So please review, and we will move forward with some highlights. All right. Any questions for me?
Oh, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Lattimore.
We received a letter from Bill Andrack, who's on the school board, plus he's also the president of the Cayuga Central Labor Council. And Saturday, there's a Workers' Memorial Day at 10 o'clock at Hopes Park. I don't know whether we had anybody representing the county to,
See what we could do.
yeah, I think that's an important thing.
And I did glance over committee reports and individual legislators' reports. So are there any legislators that would like to report? All right,
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lattimore.
Our administrator and myself did meet with Senator Schumer at the Cayuga Milk. As you know, that was a project of this board back in the day, and we want to keep them as healthy as we can, and Senator Schumer not only helped Burn Dairy go into Puerto Rico, but he also helps the steel mill with China dumping, so our senator has been very receptive to our needs here in Cayuga County in regards to some of the Canadian issues with the NAFTA.
Thank you. Anybody else? Would anybody like to speak to the local law? If not, we'll move on to the appointments. Do we have a motion?
I move.
A second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. Communications and announcements.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we will move right into resolutions. Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The legislature has regular monthly resolutions 1A and 1B. I'd like to offer them up as a bundle.
A motion on 1A and 1B.
Move.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ways and Means has 5 resolutions. I'd like to offer up 1, 2, 3, and 4 as a bundle, and we'll open up, ask for 5 after.
I'll move.
We have a motion on Ways and Means 1, 2, and 3. Second, Mr. Pinckney?
1, 2, 3, and 4.
4.
Yep.
Gotcha. We'll come back and get number 5. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank
Those
you.
are carried.
Okay, Ways and Means number 5. An authorization to enter into a master lease agreement with Enterprise Fleet Management for the management of lease of county vehicles. This just came on today, so if there's any discussion or so, I'd like to present it.
So, we have a motion?
I'd like to offer a table on this for a little further discussion.
Second.
We had to get a motion to get it on the floor for discussion.
Move it.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? Mr. Pinckney?
Just like to table this at this point in time and for further discussion.
So you're making a motion to table?
I am.
I'll second that motion.
Second, discussion on the motion to table. If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is tabled. Anything else for us, Mr. Bennett?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Health and Human Services, Ms. Daly.
Yes, Health and Human Services had 9 resolutions. I'd like to offer up HH1 through HH9 as a bundle, unless someone wants to separate them and discuss them individually.
Motion and second on HH 1 through 9. Any discussion?
I just had one comment in regards to number 7, which is the
Yes, sir.
youth tobacco enforcement. I brought up in committee that we had some violations, but we do not look at the tobacco shops that are on the reservation. I just don't want to have 2 different classes of tobacco sellers. It should be equal for everybody. If somebody's violating selling to the youth in the on the reservation, we should be able to enforce that.
Thank you. Ms. Daly.
Yeah, I think Tim brought that up in committee, but I think it was clear that these are New York State funds, and New York State would not allow to do those things on Indian land or in a store.
Mr.
Chairman,
Westfall.
I
Yep.
can address that. The Department of Health, New York State Department of Health came out several years ago indicating that the tuber violation should not be enforced on Indian-run facilities, so there's no jurisdiction to be able to do that from the state.
Do we measure the gasoline that's done?
Historically, Weights and Measures has been permitted to measure the gas, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion on HH 1 through 9? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Opposed. Ms. Daly, anything else for us?
No.
Government Ops, Mr. Foley.
Mr. Chairman, Government Operations has 3 resolutions. GO1 and GO2 did pass through committee. I believe we've discussed GO3, but it is an added resolution, so I'll bundle GO1 and GO2 for right now and move on to GO3.
Move it.
Discussion on GO1 and GO2. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? GO3.
GO3, authorizing the county attorney to sign an agreement for arbitrage rebate compliance services with BLX Group. If there are any legislators unfamiliar with this, please, I think we discussed it at some point, maybe at Ways and Means, and I offer that up as well now.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Badman?
Yeah, my question with this one is that it came up after the committee and for Ways and Means, which we sometimes have to do, but generally speaking, we do that if there's some kind of a time limit. Is this time limited? Is there a reason this can't go back through government operations as it normally would?
Well, it is time limited. The SEC requires that bondings that are 5-year-olds be audited by May or June, so we need to get that process
That
started.
answers the question, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further discussion on GO3? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else, Mr. Foley?
Thank you.
Planning, Mr. Pinckney.
Mr. Chairman, planning has 3 before you, 2 have been through committees. I'll offer 1 and 2 as a bundle. Talk about 3 later.
Got a motion on 1 and 2, second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Chairman, PL3 was added. Steve, do you want to go on that one with me?
Two-thirds vote for PL1.
We're going to back out PL1.
Mr. Chair, I could defer to Fred Westfall.
Okay.
So thank you. There have been some ongoing discussions for the last 6 or 7 months about 182 North Street. That's a piece of property that's occupied right now by the Gavra Center and the ARC. The Gavra Center has approached the county to purchase the property, to have the property transferred to them. This is the next step in that process. There was discussion about how best to effect the transfer. The discussion at this point is to transfer the property to the Cayuga County Development Corporation. That corporation could then transfer the property to the Gabber Center. There's some language in, there will be, so this is the set the public hearing on that request or that movement to have the county transfer the property to the Cayuga County Development Corporation. Any questions I can answer?
Mr. Lattimore?
I'd asked, I think you were there, Fred, that if they do not want the property, that it would revert back to us?
You did ask that question, but at this point, the conveyance would be to CCDC and then an outright conveyance to the Gabber Center.
Can we have it reverted back to that organization you just mentioned?
I had to the Development Corporation?
Yeah.
We could, I think there's a meeting on Thursday of this week.
There's a meeting on Thursday to brief the CCDC on the process. But right now, the process is for the county to set a public hearing date for May. They can hold the public hearing at the regular legislature meeting in May, and then they can take action on it. And those transfer from CCDC to the Gabber Center will essentially happen simultaneously. There'll be sort of a swap closing. It's really just a mechanism.
Conduit.
Further discussion on PL3? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Public Works, Mr.
Mr.
Whitman.
Chairman, Public Works has 6 resolutions tonight. I would like to bundle 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Public Works 1, 2, 3, and 4, do we have a motion? Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
PW 5 requires a 2/3 vote. It's amending a capital H project for the replacement of Long Hill Bridge.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, oh, Mr. Dennison.
Do we have a number for the cost to replace this bridge?
That took $2,600,000.
What's it, 2 million six?
There's so many there thrown out.
I believe it's in the resolution, Mr. Dennison, I don't.
Not to exceed $2,600,000.
2.6, yeah.
2 million?
2 million.
2,
It's in the resolution, it says 2 million something is the total cost of the project.
this is the Marchicelli.
So
This is the federal pass-through, right?
Yeah.
It's the Marchicelli money?
So I guess what I'm getting at is this is where our reserve for highway will get used?
No.
No.
No, what'll happen is that we'll use the money, we'll use our own money, and then we'll submit it to the federal government, will be reimbursed. Or to the state government, will be reimbursed. It's federal pass-through money.
95%.
95% pass
95% reimbursed, so we'll upfront the cash, and then they'll submit the claims to the state and get the money back.
But we won't take it out of that fund and then put it back in?
No, you won't have to. I mean, the cash is kind of separate from the fund balance. They have other cash that we can just use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Further discussion?
That's,
Further discussion? All right, it requires a 2/3 vote, so we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Chair, I suspect no one's in opposition to this, and so
I will defer to our county attorney.
Assuming there's no opposition, that will work.
All right.
Thank you.
Any opposition? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Should have opposed.
PW 6 was added today. It's authorizing the chairman of the legislature and the highway superintendent to sign an agreement for consulting services on Stewart's Corners Road for a box culvert replacement and slope repair. I personally would recommend this get tabled and sent through committee where it should be.
I'd like to move it.
So we got a motion, we have a second. Discussion. Mr. Whitman.
Why is this not going through committee?
Mr. Whitman, this was not gone through committee because of the timing. We're asking for just the design here so that we can get it out to bid and then bring back through committee the bid selection at the end of the month and hopefully have this award by the May meeting so that we can make this construction season this year. We had to close the road, and so we rushed the design resolution here rather than do an emergency resolution, which we know.
I guess my concern is the design is $30,000. I feel like that should be discussed. I don't feel that it's an emergency. I might be wrong or looking at the wrong road, but on Google Maps, I think this is only affecting one home between those two roads.
I would defer, I would ask I think Mr. DeForest or Dan could tell you, this is a pretty highly traveled road in the southern part of the district.
It is highly traveled.
It appears there's many ways around it. I mean, I don't see why this is such an emergency myself.
Do you live in an agricultural community?
I do.
Should really have a second.
So.
Then we have a
there
second.
are
Motion in a second.
feed trucks,
Yeah.
all that, that's one of the reimbursements. If they're going on the town roads, and they're tearing up those roads. So it's,
Let them tear up the town roads for a little while.
you know,
I mean, my other concern is for $30,000, should this go out to bid? I mean, it says in here we're just giving it to a firm that's familiar with the project.
Mr. Whitman, can I interrupt for 1 minute?
Yeah.
We don't have a second on the motion to table.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Well, now there's no discussion.
Should this go out to bid or not? I mean, for
The-
30,000.
In emergency situations, there's more lax standards on going out to bid.
That's a lot of money. I think it should be bid.
Mr. Foley?
So, am I clear that this has to be approved tonight and can't go through committee? Because if it's not approved tonight, it won't be done in time in order for it to be completed this paving season.
I'd have to take a minute and confirm that. I mean, the reason we brought it forward tonight was to request that the design be approved so that we can have it designed and bid this month and back to you for approval on the award for the May meeting.
Right.
And then we would be right in the heart of the construction season and likely be able to get this fixed before the season's over.
The precast units normally are 9 to 12 weeks in production.
That's the box culvert.
The concrete boxes that we will use in this project.
So when we, if in case for anybody that didn't hear that, what Bill said was that to order the materials, we're looking at a 9 to 12 week lead time.
Mr. Dennison?
We need to have, I guess, the consulting done before I mean, this is kind of telling us what we're gonna do, but we're really not sure exactly what we're gonna do yet. I mean, we've even had this discussion for the past 2 or 3 weeks that does the whole road need to be dug up? Does it not? So, I mean, one way or another, we gotta have it looked at. But are we having it looked at by somebody who's saying already, yep, we're gonna tear the whole road up and replace the whole box culvert? Because we can't add on to it, when for the last 2, 3 weeks, we've been told we're not really sure yet whether we can or can't. And it is a lot of money when you throw in, not just the 30,000 doesn't bother me, it's the 500,000 that we've been throwing around that I'm not really sure anyone's sure about yet. So maybe it's not such a bad idea to have 2 or 3 people look at it. I understand the necessity to get it done, but I'm done.
Can you address that, Bill?
Yes, I can. When we talked about it before, both the outlet end was completely plugged, so we really couldn't see. On the inlet end, there's a multi-phase galvanized steel structure sticking out of the bank. On the outlet end, we do know that it's a laid-up stone structure there, but it was completely black and we couldn't really see how far that steel structure came across the road. So we had a contractor go out there with a long stick hoe and clean the debris away from both ends. The water is way down now. The steel structure goes approximately a third of the way in, and then the opening inside expands in approximately 2 feet higher and 2 feet wider laid-up stone. So in talking with a couple other consultants, also with 2 other contractors, we all believe that the structure should be replaced. I don't know how it was built that way in the beginning, but the stone laid-up structure now is failing from the outlet in.
So why do we need a consulting service then? There's our answer.
We need to have the plans designed and engineered so that we can then bid out the contract work.
We have to make New York State happy, is what you're saying.
We gotta make sure that,
Call it what it is.
gotta make sure that everybody's safe, that there's enough liability protection, somebody stamps the plans.
We
got
gotta
the
make
right-
sure it's expensive, is what we gotta make sure.
We've gotta make sure it's done the right way, Mr. Dennison.
I understand that, but
Mr. Whitman?
you already know what to do.
Dennison brought up my other point.
Sorry.
When we've been discussing this for 2 or 3 weeks, did we not know it was gonna lead to this? I mean, this could have been discussed. This could have gone through the proper committee. Now, here we are in a full ledge meeting discussing cleaning out the ends of box culvert pipes and how they're formed and all that, wasting Mahonic's time.
At the committee meeting, we told you that that we had a problem, we had a slope failure, and that we were just beginning to assess the situation. We thought that it might, if it got worse, have to close the road, which we ultimately did, and we communicated to the full legislature that we had to close the road. And now we're bringing forward a proposed solution to designing the fix, and then bringing forward a bid for you once we have the design and can bid the project out. So this won't be the last time the legislature or your committee would have an opportunity to look at this. All we're asking right now is to do the design work so that we could get the bids and then bring it back to you subsequently.
Further discussion on the motion to table?
Roll call vote, please.
Roll call vote.
All set? Tucker Whitman?
Yes.
Andy Dennison?
This is the motion to table?
Correct.
Is
Yes.
that what it is? I guess I'll vote no. Just because we-
Ben Vitale?
No.
Chris Petrus?
No.
Paul Pinkney?
Yes.
Aileen McDaniel Coleman?
No.
Keith Batman?
No.
Joe DeForest?
No.
Charlie Ripley?
Yes.
Joseph Bennett?
Yes.
Elaine Daly?
No.
Timothy Lattimore?
Yes.
Michael Didio?
Yes.
Ryan Foley?
No.
Patrick Mahonik?
No.
Defeated.
Defeated.
So we have further discussion on PW 6. If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Same ones.
Mr. Whitman, anything else for us?
No, that'll do for me.
All right, thank you. Judicial and Public Safety, Mr. Dennison.
Judicial and Public Safety has 4 resolutions, Mr. Chairman, JP 1 through 4. They all went through committee, so I'd like to bundle them.
Attaboy. Had a motion, we had a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody wish to speak to local law, Ledge 2? If not, I'll close the public hearing. We do have 2 legislative resolutions. One is to fix the date and time for a public hearing to continue the room tax for